Alright, all you ghosts and ghouls of the video gaming world, welcome to another Arachnid Battle Zone edition of the DJ Smokey's Tales from the Disc. And this week's tale of terror comes from the video game none other than Lord of the Rings, War in the North. So with the approval of a violent society and with the blessing of the Fellowship themselves, I think it's time for us to grab sword and shield as we go head-on with Sauron's dark army of terror as we get ready to paint the ghoulish picture. This tale of terror began one fateful day when Eredon, Andrel, and Farron were all called to arms to help the Fellowship fight against a new evil in the form of Sauron's right hand of destruction, known as Agandor. And Agandor's dark reach had a hold on many of the different creatures around the land, using them as puppets to help him on his dark mission to help Sauron once again rule over the lands. Many of which beasts that included an evil dark army of ogres and orcs that all tried to take us out as we tried to make our way to Agandor's evil castle. And each one of these enemies would take their own individual piece out of us, forcing us to take refuge in a small town that went by the name of Sarnford. And in this small town, we would come across a man who was badly wounded and would still reminisce about the horrors he had to fight while he was out in the field trying to protect his land. He would call for us over in the corner, seeing the fact that we were heavily armored and ready for whatever Agandor would send our way, and would warn us, "Don't go to Loren! Whatever you do, don't go to Loren!" The look of terror in his eyes alone just screamed to us and wanted us to help and ask, where was Loren? Where was Loren? Where was this horrible place that he didn't want us to go? The merchant would inform us just minutes later what Loren was and why was it a place that we had no business on going to. He would tell us that it was an old elfin castle used to protect against Soren's evil army, but it was overrun by a whole bunch of dangerous beasts and is now used as a training ground for any soldier foolish or brave enough to go there. And since this place was only 3 days removed from our original location, we decided to go down there and find out why was this place so horrible. And in a case of curiosity that killed the cat, once we got there, we would be overrun by a whole bunch of undead soldiers, skeleton knights, and everything else you could possibly imagine that tried to take us out. But we had the fate and the hope of the Fellowship behind us to help us get through this heavy battle. But when fighting against Agandor's dark army, fate can only get you so far. Because after fighting wave after wave of these enemies that was coming from what seemed everywhere, we would all of a sudden hear rustling in the trees and realize that there was something more dangerous than the enemies on the ground, but something above our very heads. Farron, the dwarf, would be the first one to realize what was going on and would cry out, saying, "Look above us in the trees!" And as we looked above, to my horror, I would see not one, but 8 separate spiders coming down the trees who was waiting for us to get weak enough so they can feed upon us for their next meal. And needless to say, folks, we were highly outnumbered. No matter how strong we were, there was more of them than there was of us. I would try to take out my bow and arrow to try to take on these creatures from a distance, but every single time I would try, one of the bigger of the spiders would grab his webbing and try to pull me toward him, and in a tug-of-war contest that I felt that I had to win at all costs. Unfortunately, my legs would give out from underneath me, and I would be dragged right toward the spider's fangs. But luckily for me, Edrin would be right there to shoot the spider right in the eye to try to take it out, only for him to get caught in a web of despair from these 8-legged demons. Everywhere we went, the spiders would get closer and their webbing would get stronger as they would get hungrier and hungrier to try to take us out. Farron would let out one battle cry and would run headfirst into each one of those spiders, trying to swing and try to take it out, only for the spider's mighty webbing to finally take hold of him, causing him to drop his sword on the ground, and for him to get dragged away and bit directly in the back. And as mighty as Farron was as a warrior on the battlefield, spider venom, once it coursed through your veins, has a tendency to have more fight than you ever could. And Farron would find that out firsthand as he dropped to the ground as the spider rolled him up in a cocoon and tried to take him up into the trees. Andriel would try to interfere in this matter, also while trying to help Eridon, who was trying to fight the spiders off in the distance with arrow shots aplenty. But Eridon in the distance would not see the spider behind him, biting him in his spine as well, and wrapping him up and sending him to the trees above. I was all alone, with nothing but 2 staffs and magic to try to fend off these creatures, and I fought as hard as I possibly could. And I wish I could tell you that by the end of all of this, I was able to wipe out all the spiders and save my friends from doom. But as I was trying to help out Darren, I would not see the other 6 spiders behind me, waiting for me to make a mistake as trying to help my friends off the ground. They would take full advantage and drag me off, even though I fought as hard as I could to avoid the fangs of the spider. But all 6 of those spiders started dragging me into that one direction, and with the only last glimpse I had of grabbing toward my friend Farron, I would be in the spider's web with no escape. And with one mighty strike of the spider's fangs, the screen would turn red, we would all fall to the ground, and our fight against Agandar's army would come to a tragic end as the spiders would drag us up into the trees, never to be seen again. And with that, folks, wraps it up for another Arachnid Battle Zone edition of the DJ Smokey's Tales from the Disc. And with that, we'll be back with more right after this. So stay tuned.